Hey everyone, and welcome to topic 4, how much inventory to have. This is topic 4 in our 10-part series on changes in lean material management. So what changes have taken place from the 90s to the present day based on our experience. So how much inventory? Well, I can remember clearly that back in the 90s where we were teaching lean classes, and that question came up a lot, like how much. You're talking about Kanban. Well, how much should I have in my Kanban bins on the line or in the supermarket? And we had a ready answer, kind of a formula, which was 1, 3, and 10. So the initial recommendation was 1 day of usage on the line or at the point of use, and 3 days in the supermarket and 10 days in the warehouse if you used a Kanban in the warehouse at all, and many companies would not. So 1, 3, and 10. Now, that may seem like a little or a lot, but look at it this way. If I have 1 day on the line, 1 day of usage, that means I'm turning that, say, assuming we're working about 240 days a year. So I'm turning that 240 times a year, which is not too shabby, right? And the supermarket, too, 3 days, that's 80 turns per year. So again, not too shabby at all. And even 10 days, at 240 working days, that's 24 turns, right? So none of those numbers are particularly horrible, especially if currently you're at 2 turns per year or 4 turns per year. So it doesn't seem to be all that bad. But that's what we taught. And what we would do, the way we would use these recommendations was we would calculate Kanban sizing based on those initial recommendations, and then you'd have to make adjustments. Like for some items, 1 day would be way too much because it was a big item. There wouldn't be nearly enough storage space for that. Or something that's very small and inexpensive, maybe 1 day just doesn't make sense either. Why would I want to replenish it that often if it's a small washer or a bolt? Put more in there than 1 day. But we'd make those adjustments after we did the initial calculation and we do an analysis. So before I tell you what has changed in that recommendation, let me just say that the amount of inventory you have is more than anything a policy decision. So it's a goal, and you set it, and there's no algorithm that tells you how much you should have. But of course, you don't want to run out. You don't want to spend too much effort in replenishing it, and you want to balance this not running out with the cost of the inventory or the working capital that you'd have to invest in this inventory. So again, it's a strategic kind of a policy decision as much as anything. So don't expect a formula or an algorithm to tell you the quote unquote right answer. Now, what is happening today? Well, it varies a lot, but let me just share with you what may be the gold standard of inventory management is doing, and that in our book, that's Toyota Material Handling in Columbus, Indiana. The reason we like them is they're not so high volume, they're not so automated. The pace of work is something you can relate to. Tack time of about 3.5 minutes, but they do things very well. So compared to the 1 day, 3 days, 10 days, what is Toyota Material Handling doing? Well, their rule of thumb, or again, their policy, their goal, is to have no more than a few hours of production at the workstations. So by few hours, we mean maybe 4 to 6 hours, something like that, of usage. So not too far off from the 1 day, right? But less than that. And then their goal in a supermarket, so the area inside the factory from where they're replenishing the lines, the points of use, their goal there is, roughly speaking, a few days of inventory. Let's say 2 to 3 days. So again, we're pretty much in sync there as well. Not too different from what we were recommending in the 90s. But here's where the big difference happens. Their goal in warehouse, should they have one, is again not more than a few days, maybe up to a week, is their goal for warehouse type material. So if overall they're turning inventory at a pretty nice pace, which maybe is one of the contributing factors, not the only one, but a contributing factor to the reason that they're so profitable, right? They're doing a good job of managing that inventory. Now, here's the challenge for all of us ordinary people. Putting a day's worth or a few hours of production at their station is understandable and achievable. Same thing with the supermarket, because that's under our control. But what about this warehouse issue, which is where most of the dollars are, correct? It's not on the factory floor anymore, it's in the warehouse. How do we do that? And the way they do that is twofold. Again, this is not secret information. They do two things very well. One is they have a milk run of local, by local meaning within a day's drive by truck, local suppliers, and they actually have a daily milk run. So these trucks go out, they're owned by Toyota. The supplier does not pay for this. Toyota covers the cost, unless they miss a delivery, and then the supplier would pay for it. So these trucks go out on a daily milk run, and from Indiana, they're going up as far as southern Minnesota, down to northern Georgia. So that, they're covering a big part of the country, but they do this on a daily basis. So they're pulling material in daily quantities. Now, not the day ahead of when you need it necessarily. They have a few days buffer, but not much more than that. Okay? So that's how they control that piece of it. Now, what about the stuff that's coming from overseas? Well, we talked about that in a previous topic, but what they're doing is they have set up a chain or a flow of ocean containers that's about 30 to 40 days long in duration. And those containers have mixed items. So they're coming from Japan primarily, and they're flowing over one at a time, daily shipments from Japan in shipping containers that allow them to keep that total inventory of overseas type items down to a minimum. Because if they were receiving in monthly quantities, well, when that container arrives, they have a monthly quantity of that, and that would be in violation of that goal. So that's how they're doing it, and doing it very well. So I would say that the change has not been revolutionary, but even if you just stick with the 1-3-10 goal, for many companies, that in itself, if you just start there, that would be a huge improvement. And don't think that Toyota or anyone else can get there overnight. So if you remember the story of the boat with the water in the lake, so you lower the water, that's the inventory, and rocks get exposed. So you shouldn't really think about trying to lower that water too quickly, or you won't be able to deal with those rocks, which are the problems that will come up. But as long as you don't give up, then certainly you can achieve great things. And for many larger companies, that's millions and tens of millions of dollars that can be converted from inventory into cash without risking production, without increasing the risk of running out. So with that, we'll let it go, and hope to see you at the next topic. Bye now.